welcome to the Success Ascent. Today we welcome Mr. Darrell Evans. Darrell is a serial entrepreneur. He's also the host of the MindShift Podcast and co-founder of Yokel Local Internet Marketing Company. Darrell shares with us some amazing content. He says, first, the biggest trap is you thinking you have to do it all. He says it's not about selling a product, it's about managing you. He goes on to talk about what he calls superstar DNA, which is definite natural ability. And he says, don't hire people to do their job. Hire people to perform their gifts. I know you're going to enjoy the episode today, so on to the ascent. Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, and I am the creator and host of our show, and we are excited today to have Mr. Darrell Evans with us. Now, we're going to get to know Darrell in just a bit from his perspective. However, let me tell you what we know about Darrell. Darrell's a serial entrepreneur. He's an investor, and he's a co-founder of Yokel Local, I love that, Internet Marketing. He and his team have helped entrepreneurs and companies to generate over $300 million in revenue since 2011 online. He personally has started and or operated 6 businesses since the age of 20, and he doesn't look over 25, so I'm sure there's a great story there. He's also the host of the MindShift Podcast, which I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about. Darrell is passionate about entrepreneurship. When he appears on podcasts, he loves sharing lessons, mistakes, and breakthrough framework that have helped him and hundreds of other businesses market profitably, grow sales predictably, and build superstar teams. So, Darrell, welcome to the show today.
Pat, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. And so, as you know, we always ask our guests after we do the intro on paper, we say, okay, Darrell, tell us something about Darrell that wasn't on paper. So tell us something about Darrell that we don't know.
Yes, this is a fun one for me. I'm a fanatic about the Food Network, and I have an unhealthy obsession with diners, drive-ins, and dives, Beat Bobby Flay, and literally anything cooking and related to the world of chefs. And so I spend an inordinate amount of time on that network, as well as an inordinate amount of time in the kitchen.
I love it. I love it. Well, Darrell, you get along with my son because he's a sous chef and he went to culinary school. And those shows that you mentioned, particularly diners, dives, and drive-ins, however, that's one of his favorite shows. So I get it. And I'm guessing you like to eat like I do. So, you know, that is fun. So
I scoop.
So, Darrell, let's talk. You know, in the beginning of our episodes, I always like to talk to entrepreneurs about their journey, their success journey. That's why we titled the podcast The Success Ascent. So what would you share as an entrepreneur? Like, where did you start with the entrepreneurial mindset? Like, how far back does that go?
You know, Pat, it's a great question. It goes back to my teenage years. And I started thinking about entrepreneurship literally in my 16, 17, 18-year range. And I used to go to the store with my mom, and I never really wanted to go to the store at that time. Ironically, today, I love cooking the way I do. So I do all the grocery shopping in my house. But I would always find myself at the magazine rack looking at Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, Inc., Business Opportunity, things like that. It just was where my gaze went. I was an athlete in high school, all the way through high school. I'm a super big sports fan. And I just thought about entrepreneurship in the standpoint of I got an early access to business as well, my first job. And so I just wanted to do it. I don't know what it was. I can't say it was some pathway that I was following, but it just caught my attention and I just honored it.
So when you jumped in, like your first entrepreneurial experience, talk about that a little bit. Like, how did that happen?
That's a fun story. I started in college at the age of 20. As an athlete, I come to the end of my sports playing career. I'm going to college. Actually, at the time, I was as an electrical engineer, and I'm also a general manager for a little company called Taco Bell that is a college kid's favorite. And I started a sportswear selling business, right? So I found some vendors to buy and sell sportswear. So I was selling hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, typically what everybody calls today e-commerce. I was setting up a little stand out of the trunk of my car at the swap meet. I'd back my little Honda Civic up, and every weekend I'd go out and sell sportswear at the swap meet. So that was my first venture.
So when you did that, like, how old were you?
20-ish, 20,
okay.
21. Mm-hmm.
And so what did you learn at that point about being an entrepreneur? Because what I always love when we talk about this journey is, we talk about doing it entrepreneurially, right? Like there's no entrepreneur playbook when you start at 16 or 17, and most people, don't have mentors or coaches at that time. So who did you take a lot of your guidance from at that time?
So it's great question. My entrepreneurial guidance came from early books that I read at the time, one of which was, and I say that being an entrepreneur is much about you managing you more so
Right.
than you selling a product or a service. So, selling the product or service, what was the trick for me was when I realized that over a weekend, I could make as much as a weekend as I could make all week at work. And that was, Jim Rohn would say profits are better than wages. So,
Yeah.
so
I
that was
love
the
it.
that was the hook. The books though, Anthony Robbins' Unlimited Power, Awaken the Giant Within, early days, and really I looked to Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar,
Sure.
Les Brown. They were
Yep.
instrumental in my days. Now I've never met any of those gentlemen. It happened to be gentlemen, um, but I called them mentors because for $17, $15, $13, whatever the books cost,
Right.
you can let someone else's lessons feed into your pathway and to your understanding. And at the very least, that's what I think entrepreneurs should be doing.
Well, what's interesting, Darrell, and you and I obviously are in alignment on this. I mean, those individuals that you mentioned, the lessons that they brought to the table, they're classics. They don't change. I mean, if you go back and you look at, a lot of the successful people today, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they'll all mention things like Zig Ziglar and, Les Brown and Brian Tracy, and you can go on, Tony Robbins, and although Tony Robbins is still doing big time stuff right now, it seems like he did start when he was like 19 with Jim Rome.
Yeah.
So it's the classics just never go out of style, right? The foundational, the fundamentals there. So as an entrepreneur, what are some of the lessons you've learned?
Lesson number one is you've got to be good at keeping commitments to yourself. If you want to succeed in this game of entrepreneurship, it all starts and ends with you. Now, in that same phrase or that same statement is one of the biggest traps of being an entrepreneur, which is thinking that you have to do it all. Right. So
Right.
that's what I spend a lot of my work in doing today. So lesson number one is get help early and often as possible, because you're just not good at as many things as you think you are. And the sort of the mantra, the badge, the shield we wear sometimes as entrepreneurs is we'll figure it out. And I
Right.
think there's an aspect to that is super true and it's relevant and necessary, but only up until the point where you understand you are out of your area of what I call superstar DNA, definite natural ability. And so
Sure.
that's one of the earliest things that I think is as a lesson I would share.
So let me ask you this, because I have this belief, and I've heard it with almost every guest I've interviewed, that one of the things that they had to learn really early on, because it wasn't something that was out there readily available or that they were taught, was how to hire people around them. Do you find that's true?
Still a huge problem to this day. And I
Yeah.
just finished a call a half hour before we jumped on this show. And it is one of the things that I was very fortunate, Pat. If you can think back, I'm 20 years old. I'm a general manager of a restaurant called Taco Bell. Before I left that career, and it was a career. How do you have a career in your early 20s? That was a career for me. I learned so much about hiring, managing, training, empowering, getting results that didn't require me. So when I transitioned into entrepreneurship full time,
Right.
I had a blueprint of what that looked like running a highly efficient restaurant. And in fact, I ended up with 2 restaurants before I left that were under my management before at the same time, where I had, I think, 12 or 13 assistant managers with 55 employees
Sure.
right at the end of my stint. So I've learned 2 things about hiring. Number one, don't hire people to do jobs, hire people to perform their gifts. So that's number one. And that
Love
hits
that.
people a little weird when I say it. What I've learned is when you hire someone who is gifted and talented at the thing that you need done in your organization and it aligns with your bigger vision, you'll never have to really ask them to show up to work. They will be there.
Right.
They will be there.
Absolutely.
The second thing I think is even just right in front of that, and that is you've got to paint a picture for people. Where in the heck are you going? I made big mistakes in my early days of hiring as an entrepreneur by just hiring people to do things,
Yeah.
tasks, right? I just
Yeah.
wanted it off my plate. And I got it wrong 3 or 4 times, and then I got it right. And I think I've done it pretty good ever since. And that's one of the things I like to pass on to entrepreneurs that I work with.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. So some of the work that we do outside of our podcast is we consult with small to medium-sized companies, and we have a proprietary hiring, training, and then long-term motivation modules and systems that we bring into organizations. And our system helped one of the largest real estate companies in the world grow from a kind of like they were just a little blip in a town in Texas into one of the largest real estate companies in the world. And, so you and I live in kind of that same world, and it's just so important for retention. And, we're helping a client right now, and they just hired 3 amazing people, and they didn't have to negotiate salary. The people love it. And they're like, and everybody's struggling to hire people. So it's definitely about a system. So as an entrepreneur, let's talk about some of the mistakes that you've made. Like, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Big one is hire early and often, right?
Okay.
You've got to decide if you're the visionary of the business or if you really are the operational integrator. I learned when I read E-Myth back in 2000 that you've got to pick your lane. And sometimes you don't exactly know what your lane is, but the faster you learn your lane and the realization that there's someone else more gifted, more talented, more desirable who wants to do that thing. And that's something that would have been an early mistake. I think the other side of it is never taking, especially when you're a younger entrepreneur, when I say younger, meaning a smaller company, younger in business, is you've got to have a sales system in place that runs consistently all the time. And you need to utilize leverage. A lot of times when we're smaller companies, we do a lot to generate business, and then we go into the world of servicing the business, and then we go back to generating business, and then we go back to servicing business. And that unfortunate roller coaster makes entrepreneurship a nightmare.
Right.
And so today with technology and automation and leverage, there are simple things that even the startup entrepreneur I see just not doing that could give them leverage, time efficiency, operational efficiency, and keep the sales engine running while they're trying to, because there's 1,000 things to do, as you know, Pat, when you're running and growing a business.
Well, and it's so different today, right? Because you know how you can get access to the customer feels like a little easier, and yet at the same time it's more complicated, right? Because they're getting hit from so many different perspectives and so many different vehicles, and their attention is being drawn so many different ways. So let's stick in the entrepreneur world. And so like, what's the biggest mistake you made? Like the most painful mistake as an entrepreneur? Any come to mind?
Yeah, this is going to sound a little esoteric, but every time I've had a big mistake in my businesses, and I've had plenty, still have them to this day, it's ignoring my intuition that says this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
It is we unfortunately, as human creatures, we want to follow sometimes the path of others, but sometimes you've got to honor that nuance in your body. There's something internally. I'm blessed that I think my grandmother taught me how to recognize this, and that is this idea of discernment. Meaning, just because everybody's going left and it looks popular doesn't mean you have to go left. And so I've learned when I failed, it's because I have not acknowledged and been honored. I haven't honored that level of discretion and discernment in my decision making, Pat. It's in my decision making, which goes to what I talk about in the MindShift method. But it's always been it's been a bad decision and missing something that was very present that I just decided to ignore.
Yeah, it's that blind spot, right? We see it, we know it's kind of there, and then we don't necessarily pay attention to it. So let's shift over a little bit. So you're working with companies today, and you create this MindShift method. So talk about that. Like, I want our listeners to always walk away from a show with something that they can implement, something that they can, change the trajectory of their, mindset, their business, or sales. So talk about that. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me why I didn't name the show the Mindset Method or whatever, the Mindset Podcast. And for me, I'm a big believer in mindset. But for most of us listening to this show, we know that our life encounters 2 journeys, and that is this road from inspiration to realization. I want to do this thing, and I've got a goal in mind of where I want to go. But then life knocks us down, whether it's our fault, involuntary, whatever it may be. And we find ourselves in the place that some people call failure. I like to call them breakdowns. And I've made more than my fair share. And it's in the moment of those breakdowns that you're looking for a breakthrough. And so as I look at my life all these years later, everything in my life has been one path or the other. So the mind shift method was born out of a number of mistakes, one catastrophic one, as I would say it, but I won't get into the depth of it due to the time. But I found myself at a place where I was at a place of loss. I was at a place of failure. I was at a place of breakdown. I was emotionally broke. I was mentally broke. I didn't know what to do next. And so I said, okay, step one is the facts are now the facts. And so I
Yeah.
realized that I could not move forward until I became peaceful with the facts. And a lot of times that means honor what it is, even if you caused it. But now, in order to move forward, step two is you got to make decisions now about what are you going to do now that the facts are in place. And so, making new decisions is the moment. I call it a shift. Your life is one shift away. Your breakthrough is one shift away from a new decision that you decide to make. And
Okay.
I really say that across a lot of spectrums. And then the third step, of course, is making a plan for how you're going to move forward, right? So you can make a decision, but do you have a real clear cut plan? And I think a lot of people today, they'll say that they want to do something, they'll say they're committed to it. And
Right.
I really say that if you've drawn a line in the sand, you now have to have a playbook. You have to have a process. You have to have a pathway that's going to move you forward. And then the last piece of it is you got to make it happen. And that's
Yeah.
all on you. You have to show up every day and do the hard work to stay committed to the decision that you made long after the feeling you made it in has passed. And for entrepreneurs, especially, man, everyone knows this whole thing of fear of missing out, FOMO,
Yeah.
bright, shiny objects. They fall down rabbit holes because they just won't stay committed to the doggone decision that they made. And if they would have only done that, they'd have been so much further along. And this goes both personal and business life.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I was recently meeting with an entrepreneur and then their company, and one of the things that came out in the feedback was from the kind of the review, the anonymous review of the members of the team, was that they didn't stay the course enough. It was always the shiny bling, the change the course, change the course, change the course, and they felt like they had whiplash. And amazing team doing amazing stuff, and yet how much more amazing could they be with a little bit more of that stay in the
Yeah.
course?
And we've all done it. We've
Oh yeah,
all
oh
done it.
yeah,
It's not
absolutely.
about it's not about perfection. It's about acknowledgement, right? It's
Yeah,
it's having awareness and acknowledgement of when you're veering off the path. And I love the way Stephen Pressfield puts this in the book, The War of Art. I think every entrepreneur should read that book once a year, because what he talks about is the reason we do those things is because of this one word, and he calls it resistance.
yeah,
And I don't want to get into it there, but I would recommend it. Everyone who's an entrepreneur, it's not just about writers. It's not just about artists, because the war of art. I
right.
think what we do as entrepreneurs is art. It is art and
Mhm.
science. And we have to overcome this idea of resistance. And everything that he describes that we do as entrepreneurs
Sure.
is resistance getting in the way of the thing that we're supposed to be doing.
Which of your steps do you think the entrepreneurs in your experience struggle with the most? Like, which one is glaring? And I know you kind of said it, but I want to make sure that I
Well,
heard it the right way.
to me, it's always about it's step two. Like, to me, I believe a committed decision, and this is why I use the word shift,
Right,
because when I shift, or when we make a shift, that means there is no other option. There are no options to do the other thing.
right.
No options under no circumstances with nobody. So I think that's where entrepreneurs mess up. And today, we have so many things that we could do, but
Right.
it's about becoming narrowly focused. And so step three really plays into that, because a lot of times they need somebody like you, Pat, to really hold them to the guardrails. I use a lot of analogies in my teaching, my coaching. When we put little kids on the bowling alley and we go to the front desk, we ask them to put up the bumpers.
Yep.
And that's to make sure that the kid doesn't have a bad experience. It's not that they're going to get a strike because the
Right.
bumpers are up. It's to make sure they're not let down by the ball doing inevitably what it's going to do, which is roll into the gutter.
Right.
But as adults, a lot of times we don't have these guardrails. We like to say we know it all and we don't want nobody helping us. And so I often say step three is the biggest failure, because generally you'll keep a commitment. And that's something I believed in. I hired a coach, my first coach, in 2002.
Yeah.
Pat, 20 years later, I am still with a coach, a business advisor, a mentorship, a mastermind. I have never not had accountability guardrails in my
Right.
life. Darrell, why do you need that? Because I'm human. I'm just like you. will let myself down too. And the
Yeah,
people that count on me, I will let them down, not because I intended to, but
right.
because I didn't mean to, but I let myself drift. Like I'm human.
Yeah.
I'm part of the human experience like everybody else.
Well, and that's true because of the way, we're built as human beings to avoid pain and avoid anything that's fearful. And, we have the choice of freedom, and that choice doesn't sometimes benefit us. And that's why we need coaches and mentors and,
Yeah.
accountability partners and
And
such.
I know it sounds cliche, but everything we want is on the other side of fear.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
That's, going back to what Presswell says, fear and resistance, it's all the same thing. What we want is on the other side of it. He says in his book, and I'm not familiar with Henry Fonda, actor. I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure. He said it still at 71 when he was taking roles, he would vomit before every performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't go away. It
Yeah.
just, if you're going to succeed, that the work has to get done no matter how you feel.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
that's what it takes.
So, let's talk about, so today's entrepreneur is facing a lot of interesting challenges, let's just say, right? So what are you feeling or sensing in the folks that you're talking with about the adjustments that they're making in today's world? Because there's a lot of them, right? And yet
Yeah.
there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. You see massive amounts of people shifting out of the workforce. I mean, I just think about, 2 years ago, people would sit in drive to work an hour and 45 minutes. And COVID said, I ain't doing that anymore because they got really
Right.
comfortable, so there's more entrepreneurs coming into their own. And so what kind of share with your thoughts on that?
I think there's a couple things. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to be an entrepreneur. I think first thing I think I come to is that though there's more, less is better.
Yeah.
So though there's more things to do, you can do, less is better. Decide what it is that fits your personality style as an entrepreneur. Everybody doesn't need to be online. Everybody doesn't need to be on Facebook. Everybody doesn't have to do it. I've got companies in my agency that they don't have Facebook accounts, but their businesses are growing by millions of dollars. It's about choosing your lane where
Right.
you find that your path of least resistance is most presentable. The other thing that I would say is another little bit of a little bit of a cliche, and that's stop majoring in minor things. Right?
Mm.
I see a lot of people talking about, well, I don't have this many followers on my social media page, or whatever, my
Yeah.
click-through rates on my ads, or my whatever. That's minor stuff. If
Right.
I use analogies all the time, so let me go to the game of golf. I play golf. I've been playing golf now for about 30 years. I'm not that good. I'm, good day, I'm going to shoot low 90s. I'm not that good. Bad day, I'm going to shoot high 90s, maybe low hundreds. But my point is, any golfer who gets to the tee box knows that a hole in one is such a small fraction of an opportunity. There's no sense of even trying to hit a hole in one. Your
Right.
best shot to hit the ball in the hole is after you get on the green.
Right.
So in marketing and sales, where is the green? Where are the customers most likely to
Right.
be ready to buy? And I see all these people majoring in minor things, trying to score sales back at the tee box, just to use an analogy. And so what I have to unwrap with people is, where is your customer sitting where they're most likely to be aware that they've got a problem, in process to figure out how to solve the problem, and ready to lean into the purchase process, whether it's with your company or someone else.
Yep.
And I can't tell you, the 9.5 out of 10 people will fuss with me about the answer to that problem and how we solve it. And I have to unwrap them. Matter of fact, Pat, some people will tell me I am absolutely not going to do it because I've done it and it didn't work. And I'll say, well, if you're going to work with us or my team, that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're going to do. And the reason you worked with someone else and it didn't work is because you just weren't working with somebody who knew what the heck they were doing. So,
Well, that's so true, Darrell. I know you have a podcast, and obviously we do right now. We're talking on it.
yeah,
And I was listening to somebody else, and because I want to grow the things we're doing, and they said something which ties right into what you said. They said you can have 10,000 followers, and 5 of them are your potential customers. Or you can have 100 followers, and they're all your potential customers. And it just really struck home with me. Like, you got to decide, if you just want followers, that's cool, and decide that.
yeah.
So let's shift gears. You've been prepared for this. I
Okay.
always ask my guests, what's the absolute best advice that you've ever been given that hopefully you followed? And if you did, what did you learn?
The best idea that I have received has been, build the business as if you're going to sell it. You want to sell it or not. Now, that's a big task, but that's a mindset that can govern how you the growth of your business. Those businesses, if you're going to sell it, want to sell it or not, to me is probably the best advice I've gotten. And it's so true, because when you through that lens, it changes your decisions.
Yeah, I like that. In fact, I think that's great advice. So you've been prepared for this. We're going to flip it upside down and we're going to go, Darrell, what's the absolute worst advice that you've ever been given that hopefully you didn't follow? And if you did, what did you learn?
The worst advice I've probably ever been given. Fortunately, I've got great friends, so they don't typically give me bad advice. But some of the worst advice I've heard is stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. I've adopted the mindset that while everybody's playing chess, I'm trying to play checkers. Everybody chases tactics. I'm chasing strategy. The worst advice, it's terrible to say that because someone else is doing it, you should do it. Boy, so-and-so's doing it. No, that doesn't mean you should do it. It's terrible, terrible, terrible advice. Every business has a unique set of skill sets and offerings to the market. And what I've done in my career over the last 2 decades for sure is find the niche scenarios where none of my competitors were playing. People ask me, Darrell, how do you compete with small companies against big companies? Big companies have blind spots. We just go in where they're not paying attention. We did this with a company that, 2012, they started working with us. We did it with a company that's in a space very competitive. They ended up going from $4.5 million to $22 million and got bought by the number one competitor in the entire country because we snuck in a door. And there's always a door, Pat. There's always a door.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Great advice. Well, Darrell, you've shared a lot of amazing things, and you're going to give us a thought as we leave. I'm going to do a little PSA and clean up here before we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we so appreciate your support. You can always go to www.thesuccessascent.com. Subscribe there. You can listen to us at your favorite podcast source. You can also go for additional information on our services, my services, our coaching, our consulting, the things that we do in the tax credit recovery world. You can go to patmancuso.com and you can find out that information there. So, Darrell, let's talk. A final thought. You've prepared for this. What would you like to share with our listeners before we go?
I think entrepreneurship is one of the greatest gifts that we have available to us in this world today. If you are an entrepreneur listening to this right now, you're in this business to get, ideally, more than likely, you signed up for time freedom, financial freedom, freedom of lifestyle, and all of those freedoms. And I think my best piece of advice that I'm seeing today that I'm talking a lot about is go back to that comment of create pathways for people to use their gifts to help your business grow. Because if they can get what they want, Zig Ziglar, if they get what they want, you'll ultimately get what you want. I don't have anything that's not been said before, but hopefully you're hearing it maybe in a different way.
Right.
Give people what they want. You'll get what you want. And again, think about the unique opportunity for us to bless communities and families by creating jobs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what entrepreneurship, at least from my perspective, is all about. So, Darrell, thank you so much for your time. I know how valuable it is. You've done an amazing job contributing to our listeners, and they can go to the MindShiftPodcast.com and listen to you more and get some more great information as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, thanks, Darrell. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you, Pat.
My pleasure. And as I end every show, be happy, be healthy, be safe until the next time we talk. Take care, everyone. If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to The Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next Ascent.